Hey there, Dear Tech fam. Welcome to a very special episode of Dear Tech. It's an episode that I've wanted to do since deciding to come back to the show, and I'm calling it the best of season one. The season has been such a ride. From the honest conversations about navigating the job market, deep dives into career pivots, compensation, burnout, sky is falling, quiet quitting, every episode brought something real and something meaningful. And I had the absolute privilege of recording these episodes with an incredible lineup of guests who showed up with their hearts, humor, and their wisdom. Now, I can't talk about season one without giving some love to my co-host, Francesca. Fran, thank you. Thank you for your insight and your friendship throughout these episodes. Even though you've moved on from the show, your voice helps shape the foundation of what Dear Tech is and always will be. Now, whether you are tuning in for the first time or you've been riding with us since day one, this is an episode to celebrate what we've built and to look back on the moments that made season one so special. Let's get into it.
Recording in progress. Okay. It's going to be a great time.
Oh boy.
Okay. Does that sound interesting and cool?
Damn, I look so good.
Let's just wing it. You ready?
4 hours later.
Dear Tech.
Sharp.
Oh, laughing hurts. Cut. Do you, what has been your specific experience with negotiating and leveraging that kind of muscle as you've moved forward in your career?
My way of negotiating. Okay, so I guess I can start with, there's a really cool book that I read a few years ago, and I go back to it from time to time. It's called Never Split the Difference. It's by a man named Chris Voss. He is a ex-FBI negotiator, and it's a very, really, really cool book. And he talks about negotiating from, hostage situations all the way to, new job and trying to get money and stuff like that. So for me, my thought process is when it comes to like work and money, because that's what we're talking about, as a candidate looking for an offer, before I even go into the negotiations, I have roughly 3 numbers that I keep in mind, right? I keep my minimum amount, the amount that I need to survive, or the amount that I need to move from my current job, whatever that number is. I have a minimum number. Then I have this would be nice number / this is probably what the market rate is ish for what I'm looking for. And then I have the number that is like the number that if I'm not looking and someone's offering me a job, the number I give those people. Okay. And those 3 in their respective orders are the lowest number I'll take, medium, and then really, really high. Mm-hmm. So knowing those numbers is very important. Knowing what you want / what you're worth. Because if you go into an offer situation and you don't know those things, if someone's offering you $50K for your job and you try to negotiate and they give you $70K, but that's still $50K under the market average and you just didn't do the research, that's on you. And it sucks, right? And so I think for me, I always know those numbers. And no matter what's going on in life, I know those numbers in the top of my head. Always. And as things happen in your life, you adjust that. And then and I'm speaking more so as a candidate, because we will touch on negotiating while you're in a job already and you're trying to get more money or something like that. But as a candidate, after the interview before the interview process, they might ask you a salary, and we recommend at that point, well, I say we, but industry says, don't give a number. Try not to. Try to be like, hey, like, what's the budget, or what are you offering, or what are you looking at? At that point, they might give you a number. They might push back and try not to. I know a lot of like new recruiters learn that they should try to get the number from the candidate, and then candidates, we tell you to get the number from the recruiter. Mm-hmm. But for me, I try not to give a number, but if they push a lot, I will give them my middle number, or maybe a little bit higher than my middle number, and say, this is what the industry looks like. I'm probably looking around there, but it really depends on what other offers I get. And from that point, you go through the interview, and then they come back. And if they come back with a number that's right around what you were asking for, it's up to you. You can take it, or you can say, hey, I had a few other conversations with a few other companies. Can you do better? I encourage that, because why not? But you can take it at that point and just be happy, which is fine too. You don't have to negotiate. But if they come back with a really low number, or if it's a number lower than what you initially said, you can be very simple and just be like, hey, we discussed this beforehand. This number doesn't even make sense to me.
So then I signed up for the 10K.
I try to talk them out of it.
As soon as I signed up for the 10K, immediately Yeah, people were trying to talk me out of it. People were like, Tommy, you're gonna get injured, you're gonna get hurt, this and that. People were even saying, you know what, if you're gonna do it, just walk it. I'm like, whoa, no, like, and I didn't. It's not that I like blame them for thinking that way because of how I was and my health and everything. So, but like, I was like, you know what, I take this even more as a challenge, right? People were doubting me, so I remember I signed up for it in October, right? And the race was in January, and I had never in my life switched like that. My mentality, something was different. And I ran with that. Like I changed up my diet. I went to the gym every day. I lost about 30 pounds within 3 months or from October to January. And I went there and I was just run. I ran and I remember I didn't stop. I wanted to stop, but I was running with two of my coworkers. One of them was my manager at the time, who was like my mentor. But I remember I was running with him and he was like, "Hey, I know you're about to give up, but we're at the last stretch. Just come on, dig deep, dig deep." And I started getting emotional. Like I drive a lot on emotion. And I remember that last stretch, and Shubo knows he's a runner. The last stretch of like any races, you have all the fans like just like on the side and they're cheering. They don't know who you are, but they're cheering for their person to come through, but they're holding signs. And I remember I took off my headphones while I'm running and I'm hearing them go crazy. And I saw the finish line and I started like tearing up and crying while I'm running. Because I was like, I knew as soon as I hit that finish line, nothing was ever going to be the same. And it wasn't. I crossed it and I like embraced one of my coworkers and I started bawling, man. I knew from that point, I was like, no one can limit my dreams or my ambitions, and including myself. And that was the main person that did do that. That was me. So yeah, it was life changing, that weight loss thing, and I've continued that. I've fluctuated here and there throughout the past years, but I think I always keep like that motivation and that ambition has only grown since then, and I'm so grateful that I even like took the opportunity to do that in 2016. And
I think from both of our sides, we just want, like you said, like structure. We want to know what we're going to expect, and regardless of that, like we would ideally want a relatively short process. We don't want to wait forever, right?
Yeah.
So,
On the flip side,
mhm.
this is always an interesting part. Like from a recruiter perspective in the tech industry, obviously where we both work, past companies we worked at. On the flip side, it is, I think, an evolving and ongoing conversation about how effectively you can assess a candidate's alignment to the role and requirements of the role in such a short amount of time. It's kind of like I don't know if this analogy makes sense, but I feel it's like speed dating with interviewing. It's like if you're speaking to someone for 30 minutes or even an hour, and let's just say they're committing to a year at your company, like you're rolling that at the end of the day, you're kind of rolling the dice no matter what. Like how much can you actually like bet on in speaking with someone for an hour cap and have full confidence that they are going to like 100% align to the role. I think that's unrealistic. But so that from the company side, I think it is a conundrum how much time you put into interviews and assessing talent so you feel like you've done your due diligence to fully assess and make an educated decision that person is going to be a good candidate for the role, a good hire.
I think, especially in markets where it's a hiring manager's market or like a company's market, and it's not a candidate driven market, companies take themselves a little too seriously. And I say that because, we're no longer, if using the dating analogy, there's a few things we can say, but the first one I'll say is like, you go on a few dates and then you decide to be in this relationship, and then you wait several years and you're like, I'm going to marry this person. Our interview process isn't a precursor to a marriage. It's a precursor to we're going to start dating, right? Because like jobs you're not going to be here forever, right? We just have to accept that's the market today. In that case, if all those things considered, as a person looking at someone who might be unemployed, as a company looking at someone who might be unemployed or whatever, you're going to make me wait 2 months before I get a job? Really? Like, is that fair? Right. And on the other side of things, it's like, I don't think, so for me personally, I think a sweet spot, especially in the tech market, I think if a company says the final round is a day, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit much, but I'll still take it. It's not horrible. When it's a lot when you're like, oh, it's 3 days. It's like, dude, I'm not taking 3 days off for one company's interview, right? But I think like a 4 or 5 hours is a good sweet spot, right? Where if you do like 3 rounds in, let's say, 45-minute segments, 3 rounds, that's about a little 3 hours with some breaks in between.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good sweet spot, right? And you do a phone screen before and whatever. And in that case, on top of that, we get to do background checks. We get to do references if we want to. So there's a lot of ways to
Does
figure
anyone
out.
actually do references anymore?
I know some agencies, like I know agencies that do it. And that's like a part of their, I don't know.
Yeah.
I had a hiring manager that was like to my recruiter, like, I want you to do a reference. And my recruiter responded with like, we don't do that, but if you want to, you can feel free.
I even remember back in like agency days, we collected them, but didn't do anything with them. And then I don't think any of the last few companies I've worked at since then have done them.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think, for me, it's like, most people won't give a name unless they know it's going to be good things, right?
Oh yeah.
And so like it's not really valuable. But regardless, like coming back to the idea of when you're interviewing someone, we have all these other checkpoints. And also, do you, like, some people like, oh, I'm looking for the best candidate, or oh, this person is good, but someone better is out there. And it's like, yeah, someone's better is out there, but that's not the point, right? Like, that's really not the point, because you want, one, someone who's willing to come to your job. Maybe the best person's not willing to come to your company. You want, two, someone that you can work with. So if you find someone that's a good candidate, a good person for this role, that's where you should put your energy into. So when it comes to, like you said, an hour, yeah, that's definitely not a lot. But if you get to spend like the recruiter screen, the hiring manager screen, and then you have a 3-hour interview and a background check, I think that's enough to start dating. And then, yeah, if it doesn't work out, you can break up.
There was a disconnect between practice and policy. So what the organization was saying was important to them, or policies that they had, versus the things that they were actually doing. For example, we want to advocate people in our organization to pursue their career, and we want to provide professional development. Yet employees were reporting that they weren't receiving quality feedback from their managers. They weren't getting performance reviews. They felt like the PD in their organization was really lacking. So there was just not alignment between what the organization was saying they wanted versus how they were actually going about it.
Yeah.
I think that there was a huge shift in control during this time from the employer to the employee, and that organizations were really struggling with that, because for so long it's been that organizations kind of get to do what they want and the employees have to follow suit, and if they don't like it, then they get axed. But
shit.
In this case, that had switched completely, and organizations were like, what do you want? Like, we'll give it to you. That being said, I think that the landscape now is a lot different, just considering the economy today versus what it was like a year and a half ago. I don't think that the employees have so much of the power as they did during the Great Resignation times. But I digress.
That was
No, don't digress.
Shuba, repeat your question. Sorry, I just wanted to give some context.
No, that's fine. But actually, so don't digress, because that was going to be my question in terms of the change in landscape, right? And so, and I think Fran and I have discussed like what brought that about. But like from what you saw, going from like literally bleeding employees to now layoffs and the current economy, what? And I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but what do you think was the shift?
I think it's fear,
Okay.
and whether this was, like a grand scheme plan that politicians or whatnot had in place to like force people back into the office. I'm not going to be a conspiracy theorist.
I mean,
I think it's fear.
I have the
We're
tinfoil
here
hat.
for it.
I'm here for it. Yeah.
Get my spaghetti strainer.
Yeah.
I feel like people are just afraid of what's going to happen, and we keep getting reports that we're on the precipice of a recession. I think people are afraid of leaving comfort and secure, stable income for something that maybe will be better, but oh, what if they get fired, or what if they don't make it through the recession? I think people are going with what's comfortable right now and trying to like just tread water while we see what happens. I mean, we haven't
Stabilize.
formally entered a recession yet, but they keep saying it's coming.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, so to address that, so okay, I'm gonna throw out a conspiracy theory, but anyway, whatever. I'm gonna say something, and just you tell me what you think, and you can tell me I'm flat, like I'm being stupid. But so there's been a lot of talk of like companies overhired in that time, right? Do you think that they overhired, or were they hiring to like match their attrition, and then all of a sudden everyone got scared and stopped leaving, and they didn't slow down in time, and that's what caused the overhiring? Because the point you make is right? Like people were leaving in droves, and these tech companies like, okay, we need engineers because I don't know, I'm gonna lose 15% tomorrow, so they kept going, and then people stopped leaving, and they're like, are they done leaving? Oh, okay, damn, we just got 30% too many people, right? Like, is it something like that?
I definitely think it's the latter. That's my take, at least.
Right? Yeah.
Because we can track attrition rates. That's pretty easy to look at.
Yeah.
What do you mean you overhired?
How is the platform best utilized?
Okay, so I'll jump to company, because I think the really cool thing about LinkedIn for companies is you can put all the stuff you put on LinkedIn on your company website, right? Like for the most part, if you wanted to, you can put, pieces from people in the company, that's some things that are exciting that's happening. All that stuff can go on your website if you want to. However, I'm not checking random companies' personal websites all the time. A, B, if you're selling a product on your website, I'm not trying to look for that stuff. Like I'm not trying to go through all the tabs and look for it. Now the beauty of LinkedIn is I'm already there, and you put stuff on there and it shows up on my feed. You're able to give the job community or the tech community loads of information about your company without doing extra work, right? So you can put something on your website, drag it to LinkedIn, and leave it alone, and it'll show up places. You don't have to go out of your way to bring traffic to, because in a lot of websites, it's like, how much traffic is my website getting? That's a big question. Even with job postings, we're like, how many people are going to our careers pages, stuff like that. You put it on LinkedIn, it's cheat code, because you're not having to drive traffic. It's showing up. Then your job becomes, how do I make sure it's showing up more? And that's a whole other thing. And then you pay LinkedIn, and then they do their magic, and then it's on everyone's page. But I think if you're not utilizing LinkedIn to do the heavy lifting, right, of bringing people to your careers page, bringing attention to your company, then you're missing out. If you're only posting jobs on LinkedIn, you're missing out. If you're only putting up just company like highlights that might be in the news anyway, you're missing out. You have to add stuff. Talk about your culture. Talk about events that are happening. Talk about events that happened. Talk about people in your company that won awards. Like, you have an opportunity as a company to highlight every little thing, and it will be big because it'll show up, and you'll have eyes on it. Whether or not you get the likes and stuff, that's a whole other thing, again, comments, but you're able to have eyes on these things. And even with posts, like and this is something that I'm working on, but I don't post a whole bunch on LinkedIn yet. I'm working on it, something I want to get better at, because, and then we'll talk about it, it's a big part of, as a candidate or as a individual on LinkedIn, it's a big part of your brand as well, is posting. But even when I do post stuff, even if I don't get a whole bunch of likes, I will have 900 eyes on it. I'll see 900 interactions, right? And whether or not I got the likes or whether or not I got the comments, that's still 900 eyes on whatever I put out there. So imagine what you get when you're a multi-billion-dollar company. So I think when it comes to at least companies, I think it's really important to make sure that you are utilizing that almost free publicity, if you want to call it that.
What do you feel like are some of the core pros and cons as an employee working for a startup versus working for like a much more structured, like corporate, large organization?
I mean, first thing I'll say is, like, I think the startup experience varies a lot depending on the size and trajectory and leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see a lot of different styles. And even that in itself, I think you can weigh as like a pro versus con, where in the larger enterprise, like corporate world, we all kind of know, right? Like what's the culture of Google or Amazon or Meta? It's really hard to know up front. What's the culture like going to be like at a startup that was founded last year? You can kind of try to suss it out, but you don't know, right? It can be an incredible culture that you really fit in with and aligns with your motivations, or it can be one that works for some people, but doesn't really work for you. The startup I worked at, it was really early stage. And so it's also a little bit hard to compare there too, I think, because those types of roles are not super common, I would say. Typically when you get to like a series B or C is when you kind of start like scaling the business. All that being said, I mean, one of the big differences I noticed is like at the startup that I worked at, you have very little data and your role still continues to be very like self-driven. Whereas at Amazon, I mean, we are the data, right? Like we operate like, most of the data centers that everyone uses all over the place. You can see incredible tech trends just by logging into like the Tableau dashboard that I use to track the performance of my Amazon EC2 products, right? And so it's a lot easier to make data-driven decisions. And the other thing is that everyone that I work with has a ton of experience in the same industry. And so it's a lot easier to get like meaningful feedback and direction compared to kind of being out there on your own, testing the waters, trying out different things. But I mean, the other side of that is like, if you like that kind of stuff and you like the creativity and ideation, then you might be kind of stuck in the ways that a company like Amazon works at a bigger company versus being able to kind of take whatever approach that you want. So I really think ultimately it kind of depends on where your motivations lie and the style of working that you prefer.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to jump back a little bit back to your MBA because I'm thinking you had the tech experience going into your MBA. So for you, it was more about making that transition more concrete. Am I right in saying that? Like that you were going from the mindset, and even though in consulting you're in the business side already, but prior to that, when you went into college, at least you were in the mindset of I'm a builder or a doer ish kind of, and then getting to MBA, you're like, all right, I think I want to be on the business side of things. Is that accurate?
Not exactly. A couple of things. So first, right, ever since I graduated undergrad, my mom is always asking, when are you going to grad school? You have to go to grad school. I mean, I don't know, like, well, if that's something you ever experienced, or like, I think it's pretty common among like, Indian families. Like, how can you not have a master's degree? What's wrong with you? So my mom was always pushing me to go to grad school. And I was like, if I'm going to go to grad school, it's going to be business school. In terms of like the career impact, while I did think like coming out of consulting, it is possible to get like a job in tech. One, it's a little bit harder to change like your function. So if you're doing like strategy consulting, it's going to be easier to get a job in like a strategy role. And I kind of wanted to explore the product space to get closer to engineering and building. So that was one. And two, like when you look at someone's resume, you see their education, formal education, you see their formal experience, and you see that they're interested in owning plants or whatever, right? Like some random stuff on the bottom. So there isn't a lot of space, right? To put, I started coding at age 10. I started at technology business at 16. Like there's not really a lot you can kind of color in. And so going back to business school, I think helped to kind of put some tangible things there and actually get like tangible experiences that kind of rounded out to like the internship I did over the summer. They helped a lot to kind of show like the transition from kind of this strategy consulting world to the tech world. And when people scan resume, like a lot of times when I scan a resume, I look at what companies did this person work at? Okay. Like, what role do they have? What did they study in undergrad? And then I stop. So if you don't read like the detailed lines, like, oh, this guy managed a ton of developers and built this massive like system, they might not see that. So I think those things also, like going back to school and getting something more tangible.
In the sense that if you were speaking to companies right now, what are some things you would say, hey, don't do this, or hey, do more? So you said do more of this, right? You said give responsibility. That's great. What are some things that companies should avoid based on what you've heard from your peers, your colleagues, and your friends?
Don't leave your employees unseen. Don't make them feel unseen. A lot of new employees just end up doing stuff which is so menial that they don't get face time with their managers or their bosses or even their coworkers. I feel like being seen is what matters. You want to be seen. You want to be seen by the company and by your team and by your manager. You want someone to see the progress that you're making, because that's like an internal rewarding system. So I personally, I have like check-ins with my manager so often that I keep asking for feedback. I'm like, tell me that you see me. Tell me that you're seeing the work I'm doing. Tell me that I'm being rewarded for it. If I'm doing something wrong, that I'm learning something out of it. A lot of companies, these are the horror stories which I've heard. Their managers would talk to them once in every 3 weeks, not knowing what they're up to,
Oh wow.
give them a little feedback on the basis of what they see in that particular meeting. And there you go for the next 3 weeks with no direction whatsoever. Interns need direction. Even new graduates who are just starting out their jobs need directions. They need small but attainable goals, which are set out on regular time periods. For instance, we should have like 30-day goals and 60-day goals and 90-day goals. And those goals should be checked in on. The progress should be seen by whoever is managing those interns or fresh graduates. With that, you give them direction, you give them a path to walk on, and you're telling them that I'm not going to walk this with you. I'm not going to micromanage you because you have to take your own responsibility. But I'm standing right here and I'm watching you run this mile. I think that's what I would tell every big company to do. Just make your interns feel seen and wanted there.
Yeah, and I think you have to network. Like, and the way that I want to put it is, and I don't want, and I'm like, I hope I don't offend anyone or anything, but if I'm a recruiter and I have someone that's hitting 7 out of 10 or even 10 out of 10 and you have 4 out of 10, what reason do I have to send you to the hiring manager for review? Right? I'm like, that's not me doing a good job, because there's people that are better qualified. However, if you're out there networking with, and I'm not saying not networking with the recruiter. I mean, with the recruiter is fine and that's great. But if you're in the industry and you're because you're pivoting or you're trying to jump or whatever, and you meet these people and you learn like what they're working on, and then you do some side projects or whatever the case is, then they will want to interview on their own, right? They will send you the recruiter, be like, I'm going to interview this person. I met them. They seem really cool. That's what you would need to do to get those roles that are out of your reach. Because if you're just applying and that's it, you're not going to get as, like, it's going to be like maybe less than a percentage that you're going to get interviews for.
Yeah, I would add to that real quick. I think I agree with you, and I think at the end of the day, like, if that's what you want, like, apply. Like, don't not apply because someone told you to or you're worried, but you don't hit all the marks. Like, it's never going to be a detriment to you for applying. But I think if we're just talking about today's market, if I mean, this is slightly pessimistic, but I think it's also reality. I think if you have like less than 50% of the qualifications, you're likely not going to get seen unless you have a connection into the role. And I'll say that, one, it's not necessarily always the right thing or an equitable experience, but networking is how people get contacts and intros to places that you wouldn't necessarily if you're one of 2,000 applicants. Because I think the one reason that could benefit you if you have less than 50% of the requirements is, are you given the opportunity to speak with someone or communicate with someone past the recruiter where you can articulate how your skill set aligns and will benefit the company? Because whoever's looking at that resume, whether it be the recruiter, the sourcer, a hiring manager, they're making a judgment based off that one piece of paper. They're not going to be able to talk to you. Like, they're making judgments based on what you put on your resume. And obviously, as much as we all like want that process to be as fair as equitable as possible, we're humans. Everyone has biases. So people are going to make judgments based on experience and what they know to be true,
which may leave out someone who could have been a great candidate, but they have less than 50% of the qualifications. They don't align with the requirements of the role based on that one piece of paper that the recruiter or hiring manager is looking at.
Yeah, but I don't see really an ethical issue with, because I feel like when you network, right? I think it's still fair because I think you're doing extra work, right? It's not like the issue becomes when it's something to the effect of like nepotism, where it's like, oh, this is my uncle who's going to give me a job and whatever. But when you're going out there and you're like working and you're showing your value and because they're not just like, oh, you're a nice person. You're having to talk about these skills. You're talking about what you're doing and what you're looking to do. And then they see the potential. And this is someone that my company can invest in and someone can value my company. So it's like you're doing an extra round of interviewing almost, kind of. So I think it's a part of the process one way or another. I think it's a part of the process.
Yeah. I agree. I think from everything you shared and what we've talked about so far too, I think it comes down to like fully assessing your situation, where you're at, where the market's at, and then listening to your employees, and then kind of using all of those components with like empathy as your driver to like craft the best model you can. Well, also then they like, we keep in mind, like these are businesses, like they're trying to make money. That's always going to be their driver in most cases. And then we have, what was it? Patagonia or REI, the owners sold off
Patagonia.
whole portion. What was it?
Patagonia.
Patagonia sold off like his whole, I don't know. I don't remember the logistics of the articles I was reading, but like there's people like him, which is freaking wonderful. But it was like always like knowing they're there to make money. So then it's like, that's always going to be the first driver. But the awareness around everything outside of that, I think is really important.
But I also think like when we say that, right? If we look at all the factors of all the different factors, let's say like losing employees and the recruiting costs, right? Or the cost of having maybe not quote unquote the best employee in the seat. All these things have costs.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you can narrow down into your culture, your quote unquote perks, benefits, whatever that may be, and you actually tune it up well, and you're very intentional about those things, it almost, if not giving you some sort of a profit or a benefit, it will balance out the cost that you're putting in, because you're either not having to recruit as often, which is cost saving. Mind you, I would love to be in a world where recruiters are always in demand, but if you do it right, you don't have to be recruiting all the time or have high attrition. And then also, if you have really good people in seats, and I'm speaking to tech because, I remember asking someone about, and this may or may not be true, but I was like, why do you want to live in the Silicon Valley? And he was like, well, in their opinion, they said that the people that, this was pre-pandemic, the people that they were working with were the best, right? And they're saying, if I'm working with the best, my game's getting elevated, but also for the company, you have less people doing better work than a group of people that are maybe B-level players or C-level players. So if you're, think about it this way in terms of cost, right? Dollars. If I have 5 engineers that I'm paying above market, they're doing the work of 15 engineers below market. You're still saving money, right? Again, and I keep giving the disclosures because I know the comments are going to be like saying a bunch of stuff, but it's an opinion of someone. You may be not in Silicon Valley and be a engineer. That's not what I'm saying right now, but that's the sentiment they were giving. So if you're willing to pay a little bit more and have that level of work, it might be worth it to you because you might be saving money in the long run.
Earlier, but what are key tactics, tools, and or resources for candidates to leverage to make sure they have everything they need to go into a negotiation?
Well, I think first you need to listen to the Dear Tech podcast because we give you all the information that you need as a candidate.
Oh, Lord.
Kidding. No, but kind of kidding, not really. I think you need to be out there listening and reading a lot of different materials that give you a sense of the market. So whether that's LinkedIn, whether that is Glassdoor, whether that is Fishbowl or Blind. In Blind, I often see people are like, this is my total comp now. This is how many years of experience that I have. This is my offer. Is it good or bad? And then
Mhm.
a bunch of people comment whatever, right? So that's an option. Asking peers directly. There's a stigma around asking people their salaries. Fuck that. Just like be transparent about why you're asking. You're not being just like nosy. Be like, hey, look, I'm going, and I've done this before. Fran knows I've done this before. But I'll be like, what are you making right now? Because I'm up for maybe I'm up for a promotion, or maybe I'm looking at this role, just wondering what I should be asking for. You can ask a recruiter. Hey, and that not the recruiter that is giving you the job, a different recruiter, someone else that you know. Hey, this is my years of experience. This is what I do. What do you think? But I think the whole point is, the other thing is, if you're interviewing a lot, and I'm just a proponent of, if you're in the market, be in the market, be all in.
Mhm.
So if you're interviewing a lot, you are talking to a lot of different people. You get to look at a bunch of different comps. You get to see a bunch of different like packages and what they're offering. And another thing is, if you're really in the market like that, the first offer you get, you're probably not going to take. Maybe not even the second offer. Even if you don't have anything else lined up, you might just get a couple of offers and be like, this isn't my cup of tea. Like, thanks, but no thanks, and just move on to your other interviews and the other stuff you're doing. But that's
Mhm.
still market information you can use, right? Like if a company says, like sometimes some recruiters, they divulge to me like, listen, our budget's really tight. This might not be what you're looking for, but this is what we can offer. Then if they're saying that this number is a low number, probably. So you can use that as a base. So there's many different ways to do it, but I think reading a lot, asking a lot of questions, networking, meeting with people, that's a really good way to understand what's out there. And I think there's a lot of LinkedIn articles that talks about different things that companies offer, and a lot of companies have it on their job page in terms of not money, but in terms of like, oh, do they offer mat leave, pat leave? Do they
Mhm.
offer, and how much? Right? Like if someone's planning on starting a family, you can see, and they're like, oh, we offer 9 weeks. Oh, this company offers 12 weeks. Oh, this company offers 14, 15. So you have an idea of what the market is
Mhm.
and what makes sense for you. But yeah, I wouldn't tell people that you're looking to start a family in the interview process, but just it's something you need to know for yourself, because it's not their business if and when you want to start a family. But yeah, that's what I would think is a good tools. What do you think? What I miss?
Yeah, I agree with all of this. I think there's so many resources out there now that candidates have access to that we didn't historically, for you to be informed. Like an episode we just recorded previously, LinkedIn, like they have resources on there to talk about compensation. Blind, like there's so many reviews and resources and platforms now where employees will share their compensation, and or you can see like market rates pulled from all these different job boards that show an aggregate of compensation based on function, level, seniority, and location. So I definitely think it's fairly easy now to be informed about what the market is paying. And then I think it comes down to your style of negotiation, knowing what you're worth, and having the ammo to back up your ask.
Yeah. So, let's have one real, we have some more time. COVID ending, or not ending, but the COVID protocols ending for a lot of companies, and in-person interviews. What do you think?
I have similar thoughts as to return to office, but specific to interviews with moving back in person, I'm torn. So one, I think it's a really cool experience for candidates to go into an office, go into a campus, and meet and speak with people face to face. I think you get to assess a lot more of like the culture when it's a face-to-face interaction. And if a company has a mandate for you to be in office, you get to see what it looks like, see what your drive or commute into the office would look like. I think there are a lot of benefits to in person, but then at the same time, just as I had the same thoughts with return to office mandates, I think if we're talking about, let's say, an individual who has a disability and it's a lot easier for them to work from home, my concern is the lack of equity with requiring individuals to come into an office for an interview and or work.
I get that. So now my thought is, at least when it comes to interview, how do you ensure an equitable process if
Consistent.
some people are coming in and some people aren't?
Mhm.
But even before that, I would say, and it goes for return to work too, but we're not going into that right now. But when it comes to interview, make it worth them coming into the office. If you're going to do the same stuff that they were going to do on a Zoom call, like there's no point. There's no
Mhm.
value, right? Make it cool. And there were companies back in the day that would make interviews. Like I had friends that came back from interviews and like, that was so cool. Like I
Mhm.
did a bunch of random shit.
Got to eat some free lunch. Like got a
Yeah.
really cool tour. Saw the ping pong tables.
Got some merch sometimes, depending on the company, right? Like so
Yeah.
there's many different things you could do. Actually, so when the first question you asked about the best interview that I've ever had, they gave me a little gift card. They're like, hey, listen, it's not in person, so we're not going to be doing lunch, but usually we take you out for lunch. Here is an Uber Eats gift card for like 50
Sounds like a
bucks.
bribe.
Probably is, but you know what? I appreciated it because I like, because the thing is, a lot of companies would take you out for lunch, right? They'd be like, oh,
Yeah.
let's go to lunch, right, as a team or whatever,
Mhm.
depending on the company. So I think, what is your interview process? Is it, I don't want to say cool because I don't want to make it seem like you have to make it gimmicky. That's not what it is. You have to show value for them coming in. Make it really interesting. Like are you giving them an actual tour, right? If you're really bringing them into a room, talking to 8 people and then they're leaving, that's pretty shitty. But if you're giving them a tour and you're showing them, oh, this and that, and this is
Mhm.
what's cool, that's where it's at, right? And then when it comes to what you're saying, I 100% agree. I don't think. And I think there's another thing, even before we talk about the final round interviews, I've heard conversations of like, oh, recruiters should be doing face-to-face conversations in the office. Ain't nobody got time for that. I'm gonna say this for me right now. Quote me. It is disrespectful to a candidate's time just to do that. And look, if they're currently not employed, they'd be willing, it's fine. But then there's also an equity issue because if I have a job, I'm not coming in. I'm not going to take off for work for 1 hour face to face with a recruiter. No offense to recruiters. Heck, I am a recruiter. That's not the point. But the point is, if I have a job, I'm not doing that. I'll do a phone call. We'll figure that out. Lunch break, fine. Now, if someone's willing to come into the office because they're not currently employed and this other candidate has a job so they can't come in the office, that also messes with the whole equity piece, right?
Mhm.
So there needs to, again, structure, being standardized, and taking into account what makes sense for everyone.
Yeah. I think that was like a really good part of the conversation, because I think so often it's like the recruiter is who oftentimes candidates are engaging with and speaking with throughout the entire process, but understanding the part recruiters play in the larger process of getting an offer approved, and how to understand a recruiter's perspective and intention, which at the end of the day is to hire great talent, which in this situation is you if we're coming to you with an offer, and understand typically a recruiter's number one goal is not necessarily to save the company an extra $5,000 by undercutting your offer, or our highest priority as recruiters is not necessarily the financials of a company. That's finance and comps higher priority typically. So understanding what our priority is and then utilizing the position of the recruiter that you're working with to be your voice box when you are coming back with an ask.
Also know that you're also helping the recruiter sometimes, maybe if they don't know the market, understand the market. And if you can say, look, I'm sorry, but your company's $20,000 off the mark in terms of
Don't
what the
apologize for
midpoint
that.
should be. Well, yeah, you don't have to apologize, but I'm saying you can tell the recruiter. And then if the recruiter has the epiphany or realizes
Yeah.
that, then they can go back and then they make the case, right?
Mhm.
Because that's what they have to do at the end of the day. But if you don't ask, you don't get, right? If your mouth
Yeah.
isn't open, you're not gonna, closed mouths don't get fed. So make sure you're talking about it. But I think another thing is when we just jumping back to the initial, like when they ask you what you want, make sure you verbalize that in a very specific way. Don't say I'd be comfortable with 150, because they come back and they offer you 150 and you ask for more, you look like an asshole. You say something to the effect of, I'm looking, it seems like the market is somewhere between here and here. That might work out, but I'm also speaking to other companies, so I'm trying to get an idea for the market myself. But I totally, if you can be in this range, I'd be open to furthering the conversation. Then if they come back to you and they're in that range, you'd be like, you know what, I really appreciate, and again, you want to be positive, you want to thank you so much, I really appreciate this offer. However, after speaking with a couple more companies, I realize that my value is probably around here. Can you get to this number, or how close can you get to this number? And then let them do their song and dance. They might still be a little bit annoyed, but at least you posed it in a way that makes sense.
Yeah. I will also say to that too, from my perspective in recruiting, I want people to ask for more. I'm like, you ask for it. Like, I might not necessarily be able to give it to you, but like, ask. Like, exactly like I said, like, closed mouths don't get fed. Like, at the very least, ask. You never know, however you want to go about it, obviously. But often, I think a lot of companies don't necessarily take the tactic, which isn't necessarily the right way, depending on perspective, but that's another conversation, aren't going to give you the absolute like capacity of offers that they could give you. They're I think oftentimes people take that middle of the road approach of giving you a good offer, and then if you ask for more, they can flex. I think a lot of companies are different in that approach, but I think it's just something to be mindful of as a candidate, is like that, like, asking is not going to like negatively impact you. The worst they could say is no.
Yeah, friend, I think you're super nice. I think you're extra nice for that, because I think for me, when my thought process as a recruiter is, I want to be, okay, so as a recruiter, not that I want to lowball someone, but for me is like, if I can save my org an extra 20K because budgets are tight, I'm happy about that. So if you ask for the midpoint, I'll be like, I can do that. Are you sure that works for you? I'll give you an opportunity. I'm like, you're sure that works for you? I can absolutely do that. I think, that's actually right where our budget wants to be. Does that work? Yes, it works. Okay, cool. Right. That's the number that I'm looking at. Again, unless you're asking for a really low number, then I'll be like, hey, kind of low. But if you're asking me for the midpoint, be like, solid, let's go. Like, let's do this right there. Because for me also, if I save $20,000 on your job, I have this really hard job here that's a low ball number. Like, hey, can we take this 20,000, put it onto this job so I can hire someone for, it's here and there. I think as a candidate or someone influencing a candidate, I'll say, hey, ask for more. But when I have my recruiter hat on, I'm doing my thing on my side. But Fran is nicer, so we hope that she is the person that you're talking to when you're negotiating.
For all future employers, I will say I am mindful of finances, but I definitely lean a little more on the candidate side.
Because you're wonderful.
Thanks. The other point I did want to bring back up that I think you had mentioned before was understanding your legal rights on a federal and state level when discussing compensation. I think is really important. So many companies, either verbally or within contractual agreements, oftentimes have some sort of written or unwritten communication deterring employees from communicating compensation to each other. I understand why. I think there's so, like, being on the business side, I think obviously there's so many different factors that come into extending an offer to a candidate. Some candidates might have a little bit more experience or relevant experience, be coming from different companies, might have been hired at two different points in time when supply and demand was very different in the market, which caused fluctuation in compensation. There's so many different factors that can come into extending an offer that can create disjointed levels of compensation across teams. And I think it's a constant ebb and flow for companies to calibrate that and the strategy they want to take with making sure their teams are fairly and equitably compensated. But on the flip side, I think from the employee perspective or candidate perspective, you have a legal right to verbalize your compensation to anyone. On a federal legal level, you cannot be implicated or held liable for communicating compensation to anyone. If anyone tells you otherwise, whether intentional or unintentional, they are not adhering to law, like federal legal standards around what you as an employee can verbalize. So I think it's really important. I know it's like frowned upon, and depending on the intention of why someone's asking you, I think because of like societal and industry norms, I definitely like I'm not someone that's gonna like blurt out my number and what I'm making. But if someone comes to me, especially if it's from a marginalized groups that oftentimes is negatively impacted by lack of information around market rates and compensation, if someone comes to me with an intention of like asking so they are informed about what to ask for, I will 100% tell them. Because I think there's so many systems in place that have not enabled the equity of pay across so many different groups. So I just think that's an important call out to note for people is you cannot be held legally liable if you do communicate your compensation to someone.
Facts.
Unless there's something actually, I'll give a disclaimer there. Unless there's some specific nuance of your role within your contract that you signed away your rights. And I'm not a legal guru, so I won't fully dive in here, but there could be some caveats to that. Either way, do your research, understand your legal rights when it comes to negotiations.
So based on what you just said, one thing I'll say is read your offer letters, read your contracts.
Yeah.
Okay. Like listen, everyone, before you accept a role, get your offer letters, read them again, underline things that don't make sense, ask questions, and make sure everything makes sense. I don't believe in 2023. Okay, wait. I hope that we don't have it in 2023 that companies are putting shady shit in their contracts. But regardless, read it. Okay, understand what you're saying that you're going to do, what you can and can't do. If something doesn't make sense, bring it up. It's not exciting for a company to have their like employment contracts redlined. They don't really like it because they have so many to do. They can't have like everyone. However, if there's something in there that really doesn't make sense, bring it up. And also to Fran's point, you need to know what you can and can't say while you're at work. I don't think that a lot of companies are legally allowed to put that you can't say your salaries on contracts unless again you're like, I don't know, a spy or something. But I think in general, I think you can probably talk about it. One thing you might not be able to talk about is like your stock options. Like maybe that's something that might be private, but base salaries, bonus percentages, I think that's fine.
Okay, so I had down some of the reasons that you noted from your research in regards to mass layoffs and the Great Resignation being remote and hybrid work options, reprioritization of values, work-life balance, and reevaluating career paths. Those were the core ones that I'd pulled. If I'm missing any, sorry. But can you dive a little bit deeper in each of those areas and what you found as to like why those were key reasons why people left or resigning?
Can you say them again?
Yeah. You're like, it's been
I
a
might
year.
need to
Don't
write
remember
them
any of it. It was remote and hybrid work options. So that like these were the big reasons why people were leaving their companies or their jobs or their industries. Remote and hybrid work options, reprioritization of values, work-life balance, and reevaluating career paths. Which that last one I found interesting because I think we've seen too, like there's been so many people who've like I feel like there was like a really strong pull. This is going a little on a tangent, but a really strong pull of teachers moving into the tech space, which I found to be really cool. So it's just so interesting, especially when you see like less societally common. Does that make sense? We're making up that term. Less societally common, you know what I mean, where like someone takes like a total pivot, but it like makes sense, like the skills and competencies that they have align.
It's funny you say teachers specifically because my aunt was a teacher for 23 years, and during the pandemic, she got a job as a data analyst. Like,
oh my God, really?
She was a math teacher. Yeah.
Wait, tell us more. That's really cool. Was it like something she'd always wanted to do? Like, how did she pivot?
She was just sick and tired of the way that teaching has changed over the years. And I
Underfunded,
mean,
yeah.
underfunded. And she works in an underprivileged school district, so just, you know, it was not a good environment. There's also, generationally speaking, been a shift in, like, I'm gonna say parenting styles. Like, I feel like when we were growing up, our parents held us accountable for our actions, and like if we did bad on a quiz or something, it was our fault. That's not the case anymore. It's now the teacher's fault, apparently, if your
so
kid
wild.
behaves badly.
It's so
or
wild to me.
Yeah, so she was just done with dealing with parents and the administration that she was working for, whatever.
It's like you're raising a generation of assholes if you're not holding them accountable. Like, they grow up thinking that they're the shit, and it's just, yeah. Anyway, sorry. I had to say
and
that
like
loud.
never being held accountable for their actions.
Yeah, it's wild.
But yeah, so I think she hit her 23rd anniversary, and then she left.
Wow. And is now a
Be
data
data
analyst.
analyst.
That is so cool, especially after being in the field so long. Was she
I'm
like
She's a
very
math
happy
teacher,
for
so
her.
she was probably, like, being a
Yeah,
math teacher,
that's
she's probably
true.
like,
That's
perfectly
true.
equipped to get into, like, data
Yeah.
analysis.
Yeah, and she's like super into Excel and all that. I was like,
Yeah.
have fun with that.
How long has she been in the data analyst role now?
A little over a year.
Whoa.
Do you know if she enjoyed it, or if she's enjoying it?
She enjoys aspects of it. I know she's had a hard time kind of shifting from like being
Totally
a
different
teacher,
environment.
working in
Yeah.
a school, and like into the corporate space where like
Yeah.
you have to have your email up at all times, and like if you get an urgent email, you have to respond, like that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. I think she's had a little bit of like a learning curve with,
Transition.
but generally
Yeah.
speaking, she loves it, and she works remote now, so she doesn't have to leave her
Wow.
house.
We
Like,
gotta get her on the show. I'm not even
Yeah.
joking.
She
I'm not
might
even
need to be our
kidding a
next
little bit.
guest.
If you're okay with it, no,
I'll
that's
talk
like
to her.
that's incredible, right? Like, that kind
she
of a
doesn't work
shift.
for a tech company though. She works for a college.
Data is data.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, data
tech
in
industry
one
and
way,
tech
shape, or form,
people.
it turns into tech in some way. You use the word data on your resume, someone will reach out to you and say, like, hey, I have a data role, and then you're like, I'm a recruiting manager. What are you talking about? It happened to me. But anyway, I digress.
That
So
was really
you wanted
cool.
me to go
Original
in
question,
depth
yeah.
on why I
reasons
chose
why.
these reasons. Okay.
Yeah.
So remote hybrid, I feel like that's quite obvious.
Yeah.
As everyone was like pushed to be remote as an essential part of business during COVID, I think people started to really enjoy it and see that there's a lot of advantages to working from home. There's
Yeah.
definitely the side of it where people were really struggling mentally, weren't doing well, being at home all the time, lacking socialization. There can be trouble with creating organizational culture remotely. I totally acknowledge that all exists, but the vast, vast majority of exiting employees that I spoke to, I actually think it was almost all of them, wanted remote opportunity or at least hybrid flex scheduling ability. And one of the biggest things that kept coming up over and over again was that their organization would say, oh, we want to be flexible, but we have a return to office plan and you're going to have to come back by this date. So people were starting to say, okay, well then I'm going to go look somewhere where it's a 100% remote job and I don't have to deal with this BS.
Yeah.
Reprioritization of values. This was one that came up a lot as well, where people were just, in the midst of a global pandemic where we're all like scared for our lives. Like, if I go outside, am I going to die? Like, I think people were really starting to realize that work shouldn't be the epicenter of their life and that they should have more of a personality than just what they do for work.
Yeah.
Particularly people that had children that I spoke to loved being able to be more present in their children's lives. They got to, go to soccer practice or like just be at home and have a movie night because they weren't spending 2 hours in traffic coming home. Like, it just made them realize there's people out there dying from COVID. Like, what is really important to me? Is it this job that I slave away at that they're paying me measly wages for, that I have to go schlep, 2 hours in
that
LA
word.
traffic to? Like,
Yep.
just like
Preach.
generally speaking, people were starting to reprioritize what was important to them, and work was falling lower and lower on the priority list. And I think because of that, people were starting to look for jobs that fit more into their lifestyle than adjusting their lifestyle to work.
Yes. Yep. 100%.
Work-life balance, I think that just kind of feeds into both of the things I just talked about.
Yeah.
Remote hybrid, you have so much control over, work-life balance. Work isn't everything. You should be able to shut your laptop at the end of the day and not have to worry until, the next day.
Yeah.
But it's also been proven. It's not like you're shutting your laptop and like sacrificing productivity. It's been proven that remote
You are
work.
more productive if
Yeah.
you can have like a set time that you're working at.
Yep.
Also, just like mentally speaking, like you shouldn't be expected to be on 100% of the time. This is something that me and my coworkers have talked about before. In a remote setting, I keep having to like force myself to take breaks. And I'm thinking about if I were in the office, I would, I'd stop by Franny's office and have a
Gabbing
little
away.
chit chat.
Yeah.
I'd go out to lunch with my coworkers for an hour.
Yeah.
Like that's okay to do at home too. Just
Yeah,
because
we
I
totally
have the
forget that.
luxury. Yeah.
There'll be days where I'm like, holy shit, I've literally been sitting here for 3 hours straight and I haven't even stood up. It's bad, but it's so true.
No, I was gonna say before we started the podcast, I would just randomly ping Franny and be like, "Hey, what's up? Like, let's bullshit for like 15 minutes and just like talk
Necessary.
about life." It is necessary. It's very like that's the thing. If anything is missing from remote work, it's that like natural whatever, right? Not
You
doing
have to be a
work
lot
or
more
just
intentional about it.
exactly because you will sit at your
Yes. Yep.
desk and be like, "Oh, I forgot to eat today." Like that's
Yes.
that. Fran will tell you that happens to me all the time.
Yeah.
But it will happen where you're just like working and working and you're just like in a zone and no one's around to bother you, so you're just like going at it, and then it's like, well, damn, I'm really tired now.
Yeah,
But,
we had talked about this in the last episode too. Like my boss had done pulled a study from like recruiter productivity during the pandemic when everyone was forced to work from home, and it was significantly increased. But we talked about this in a past episode too, where we went over work from home versus return to office, and there's obviously like both sides. Like there's a ton of benefits to be in office and reasons why companies want employees to be in office, which some of them like 100% I feel have merit. But at the end of the day, I'm a big proponent of hybrid and having that flexibility because of all the reasons that you mentioned.
I had one HR leader that I interviewed where she said, quite frankly, the only reason we're forcing people back into the office is because we pay for property in downtown Los Angeles that's very expensive, and we want people inside of it.
Wild.
And I
Wild.
feel like that's not a good enough reason.
Not for us, no. Not for us from an employee perspective.
From
Heck
our
no.
perspective, yes.
Yeah.
From a bottom line CEO perspective,
Yes.
I get it. I get
I
it.
mean, but there's alternatives, right? They could sublease the space. They can sublease a lot of the space. Like you can, again, like, are you asking questions? Are you asking what percentage of my employees are wanting to be remote? Oh, 65%. Okay, let's take the Mr. CEO. You ask the question, we give you the answer. 65% of your people want to be remote. Then sublet some of your office space. Again, we're not CEOs. We're not pretending to be CEOs. We don't know the exact details, but
One day.
often we can see that these questions aren't even asked at that level.
What value do you see in the importance of networking? Because in my eyes, sometimes networking can play a larger role in you getting your next job than your actual skill set, simply based on access.
I think networking matters. I think the amount that it matters can vary based on what your job role is and what types of skills are most important in that role. In the world of like business, networking is super important. A lot of jobs that are like the most coveted roles are already staffed before it even goes to any sort of like, public auction, right? Like, oh, I know a guy who would be a great fit for this job. Let's just put him into the process early. If we like him, we just hire that person, right? And if you don't have a seat at the table, then those roles are totally out of reach. So that's one, from a career progression perspective. But the other thing on the business side is like, having a strong network can also help you stay on top of the market and have access to experts in different fields. So in the MBA world, I mean, one of the things that I think most business schools try to do is build a diverse set of students, people who come from different industries, different countries, different job roles. And let's say, for example, if I was a consultant and I get staffed on a project where I need to diligence like a dairy farm company or something like, like, I don't know anything about dairy farms, but I tell you what, one of my friends who lives in Seattle is a dairy veterinarian. So I can just go ask him, right? Like it's some like random stuff like that, where if you're looking for certain knowledge in like some random field, like having a network from an MBA program can really help with that. And I've also done the other way where like, if I'm trying to find a job in a certain industry, there are probably people in my MBA program, and especially I was doing this while I was a student, who came from that industry. So they can tell me all the inside stuff, right? Like, where's the industry going? What kind of skills are important? How can I prepare for this type of thing? And odds are they probably also have a pretty big network in that industry too. So they could kind of help you find those roles as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's such a good point. Follow-up question that will be like the opposite of your experience. So I'm just curious for your perspective. I think obviously there's so much privilege that comes into getting an education that can provide you access to networks and open doors that a lot of people may not have access to. If someone wasn't able to go and get a master's or get a degree, what would you recommend as another route or steps that they could take to get to the same end?
It probably, great answer. It always depends, right? So it probably depends on, what your goal is, but maybe one piece of advice or suggestion I would have is just like looking at communities that are interested in the thing that you're interested in. So whether that's like a digital community or a Discord server or a LinkedIn group, or like an in-person community that meets up in like a makerspace in New York City, like those are ways that you can, kind of join that community, build the skill set around the thing that you're interested in, learn from experts. And I mean, I think, it takes investment, right? Like you need to show up consistently and participate. But I think that's one way that you could like kind of start that journey. You might not get the scale at the same rate, but it's something.
If you were to get those companies feedback on their interview processes while keeping in mind two core factors of one, being able to effectively assess talent, and two, candidate experience, what feedback would you give them, if any?
And the interviewing process, you said.
Yeah.
I feel like screening could be done in a lot more better way. I feel like screening right now is a lot more competitive. So what people normally end up doing is finding loopholes. So if you try to screen resumes through online automated services, you kind of lose out on the personality of the individual. And people use mass recruiting tools to apply to hundreds of positions at once. So it ultimately becomes a numbers game. And that's what I started out with. And that's what the system was. I had to game the system, and that's why I had to apply for 250 plus positions. That is not right. That's not how it should be. I feel like it should be quality over quantity. I might be like, it's an unpopular opinion, but I feel like cover letters should be back in the business, because if you are truly interested in the position, you should be able to justify why you are the right fit. What kind of experience do you bring to the table? What kind of interests and skills and the soft skills and the technical skills you have, which will help you on the job. And like, if you have those answers, that's the only way you'll be successful at the position in the longer term. And that's what the company wants, and that's what you want as an individual as well. Again, it's an unpopular opinion. I don't think.
It's a valid point, though.
It's a medium, because I think no, because we've talked about it, right? Like so Fran and I don't love cover letters, but we've talked about how if you're new to the industry or if you're pivoting to a different industry, that's where a cover letter shine, right? So like your point about an internship, I think that's 100%, because you're coming straight out of school. Like, you were a sophomore, you have no experience in any of these fields, right? You've learned about it, but you don't have actual experience. So your cover letter is probably very valuable. So I that in that sense, I can say yes, but in general, yeah, it's an unpopular opinion. I don't love cover letters.
It's
I
just
think
how. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, sorry, I think your point totally is valid. So I definitely lean not loving cover letters either, but I do think I've been having so many conversations lately about automation and the increasing role it's going to play in recruitment and how talent acquisition assesses talent. And it's only going to increase, but my concern is very much so like, I think there's a lot of areas where it's going to benefit, but I think obviously the concern is like the human element that automation would remove from the assessment of someone's soft skills or personality traits that align to the competency of the role, or understanding like who they are as a person rather than just what words are on a page being pulled by the system. So it's like I don't have answers to it, but it definitely is like I think a growing concern.
I feel like the industry is kind of like changing right now, and we're in the middle of things because right now there's a way of hacking the system. For instance, like we have systems which pick up these keywords, and so people just add in those keywords into the resume just so that it can get picked up. But there'll soon the systems will get more sophisticated, and we can probably get past the problem and still have automation involved in it. And I think that'll be a happy future. And like the whole cover letter thing, I think the reason why I bring it up, I my degree was in computer science and I entered product management. So it's not a normal career path. Not a lot of people around me were going into product, and it's not what you would naturally go into. And that's why I feel like a cover letter would help me explain myself more. Which is why, as a student of computer science, am I choosing not to go towards development or research or data, but move into product.
But for the people that are listening that may want a career in tech, that weren't in tech, that want to transition into tech, what did you do to make yourself? Because right now you're heavy in tech, right? You've been in tech for the past like 4 or 5 years now, and this is the industry you're sticking to from what you've told me. So what did you do to shine in that role at University of Phoenix those 2 years?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think like in the beginning, I was trying to absorb as much as I could. So I was very insecure. So when they were talking, because all my other peers, all my other Scrum Masters at that time, they were from a tech background, right? But so in the beginning, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm the only person in tech in this building that doesn't know anything, that doesn't know jack shit. And I was just so like when they were talking, when the team was talking, everything was going over my head. I don't know another like that had to be one of the most intimidating moments or times of my life where I was just like, they're speaking, I'm in a coach leadership role, if you will, on a team, and I don't know what the hell they're saying, right? Everything's about APIs, microservices, spikes, stories, all that stuff. Like, I was like, what are you talking about? But then but then my VP and also my leader, both of them did not quit in stroking my ego, but also keeping my confidence high. It's almost like sports. Like when you have a star player and you know you have a star player, you want to keep the confidence high, right? So that's what it was. They were like, Tom, we're not asking you to build something. We're not asking you to know these things. That'll come. You're drinking from a fire hydrant, which your role is a Scrum Master, leading them through the Agile framework, right? So I knew the Agile framework. I remember I told you guys I was at Starbucks every other day, right, studying. I knew the Agile framework. It was just applying it to what we were doing. So I was like, you know what? If all else fails, lean on that. But also, I got really comfortable with playing hey guys, I'm the dumbest guy here. Why don't you break this down to me, right? And very quickly I realized that a lot of the team members and everybody like in tech, sometimes you get so tech that it's an impediment to yourself, right? Like you are so granular and you're talking like a certain way that the tech jargon, it goes over a lot of people's heads, right? And I realized that this isn't what my role is to really empower the team, and the knowledge will come. Like, yes, since then I've gotten more knowledge. I've done more learning since then. Things do make a lot more sense to me now. I'm not still the most tech person, right? But a lot of the leadership roles within tech, they have a certain amount of knowledge, but they let the experts lead, right? They let them lead. So for me, I got comfortable with they're experts in their lane. I'm the expert of my lane. Now let's work together, right? So it took a lot of time for me to get comfortable with that. It took a lot of like, I would ask a lot of dumb questions. I would ask a lot of, what does this mean? What is it? I'd even like on my spare time, I'd be like, hey, developer, can I sit with you? Right? It was back to the shadowing days. And I am not afraid of that. I was sitting right next to him and be like, talk me through this. What does this mean? And it would take 1, 2, sometimes 3 sessions. And sometimes I would even get it, but I think I also earn my team members' respect that, hey, this guy, like, he doesn't need to know tech, but he's willing to sit with me and learn or try to learn, right? And things got easier at the time, but I think just really just knowing that what my role is to be a coach, a team coach, right? And just talking agile to them. So yeah, I think I was trying to be bigger. I was trying to do more than I should. And that's what made me more intimidated.
I think you said a gem,
I think that's
not just for tech or for Scrum Masters. I think for leadership as a whole, I think you said a gem, that you let the experts lead in their field, where I think Simon Sinek says this thing where he says, as a leader, you're not responsible for the results. You're responsible for the people that are responsible for the results.